or something.
Sounds great. I will send an email to Patrick immediately, but you are now live.
All right, welcome everybody to Creswell Planning Commission meeting. Today is September 3rd, 2020. We are live we're streaming on YouTube right now, so welcome to anyone that's on YouTube here. Present planning commissioners, we have Jessica Lanstra, Chair, Susan Bennett, Vice Chair, David Christopher, Ed Gunderson, Seth Clark, and Tammy Sue Shuck. Hopefully Patrick will be joining us shortly. So let's see. Has everyone had the chance to read the minutes from July 16th, 2020? Yes, okay. Do we have anything we need to change, or is there a motion to approve the minutes as they are?
Move to approve the minutes.
I'll second that.
All right. Those in favor of approving the minutes, I'll go one by one so I can get a roll call. David? Yes, okay. Let's see. Seth?
Yes.
Okay. Ed's got a thumbs up. Susan?
Yes.
Okay. And then Tammy?
Yes.
Awesome. All right. Unanimous approval for the minutes. All right. So moving on here to our audience. Welcome. I see quite a few people over that's on our meeting here, and then to anyone on YouTube, welcome as well. Very excited to have so many people here, or not here, sort of here. All right. Do we have any commissioner comments tonight?
Yes, I would like to remind everybody to do your census. I've spent a month and a half going around getting those of you who have not done your census. So once again, if you haven't done it, do it.
Thank you, David. Anyone else have any comments? No? All right, moving on to new business. We have a public hearing tonight. All right. Public hearing SR-2020-02, Creswell Butte Apartments. Today, the Planning Commission is considering case, case number, SR-2020-02. It's a site design review and change of use request initiated by Aldate Investments LLC to convert an old motel building on tax lot 2301 at Assessor's Map 19-03-14-40 from a commercial use to a mixed use. The proposed building was used as a motel for many decades and is proposed to be converted to a mix of apartments and ground floor commercial uses. The property is zoned general commercial, a designated commercial on the Creswell Comprehensive Land Use Diagram. The proposal will be reviewed subject to the following sections of the Creswell Development Code. Section 2.3, Commercial Land Use Districts. Article 3, Community Design Standards. Section 4.1.400, Type 3, Quasi-Judicial Review. And Section 4.2, Site Design Review. This application will be reviewed under Section 4.1.400, Type 3 Review, 4.3 Land Divisions, Section 2.2.120, Residential Districts, and Section 3.1, Access and Circulation, and Section 3.4, Public Facilities of the Creswell Development Code. Testimony, arguments, and evidence presented must be directed toward the applicable Creswell Development Code approved criteria. The failure of anyone to raise an issue accompanied by statements or evidence sufficient to afford the city council and parties opportunity to respond will preclude appeal on that issue. The failure of the applicant to raise constitutional or other issues relating to approval criteria or proposed conditions of approval with sufficient specificity to allow the city to respond to the issue precludes an action for damages in circuit court. The public hearing on Creswell Butte Apartments, SR-2020-02, is now open. Do any commissioners have an ex parte contact, visited the site, actual or potential conflict of interest, or bias to declare? Okay, I'm seeing all head nods. Tammy, I can't see you.
No conflict. I have been by the site, but have no conflicts. Thank you.
Great. Thank you. Okay, so it looks like no one has any conflicts. Okay, so now we are moving on to the staff report. Maddie, would you please present the staff report?
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you. And thank you to the applicant's team for your efforts thus far and for joining us tonight for this public hearing. As Chair Lance just stated, you are considering tonight a request to change the use of an existing commercial building. Just as a precursor, I would highlight that the applicant has proposed an application that very much aligns with the recent code changes that you recommended to City Council that were processed and approved in March of this year to allow certain types of residential uses within the general commercial zone. And you'll remember that that was something a bit more difficult before your work, and it reflects the requirements and anticipated need that was detailed in Creswell's 2019 housing needs analysis. So you may all be very familiar with the location of the project. The project is located at 345 East Oregon Avenue. You can find that at Assessor's Map 1903-1440, Tax Lot 2301. We're talking about a site that's about 2.2 acres, and up until very recently, it was used as a Super 8 motel. The applicant is, as you've seen from a very nice presentation, I hope you all had a chance to look through the packet provided by the applicant's team to reimagine a structure that has long been underutilized from staff's perspective, and has gone through several renovations over the years since its construction in the late 1960s. You will also remember that it was partially burned in 2018, and that was a sort of a complicated story that I won't get into here, but if you want more details on that, I can certainly share them from the city's perspective. The building itself is a two-story building. There are two buildings. Both of them are 2 stories. Basically, it covers about 12,700 square feet. The front building had primarily housed a lounge or a reception area and a suite for the manager and several rooms. And the second building, which is more southerly, which provided the majority of most of the hotel rooms. The two buildings are being considered as one proposal, so they're not separate in their concept. However, the northerly building from the applicant's proposal proposes to convert the downstairs, the entirety of that downstairs area, into commercial units or commercial space to be determined per interest by commercial leasees. And the rooms, I believe there are 75 existing hotel rooms total in the development, are proposed to be converted to 47 apartments. So as you'll see on the applicant's proposal and I can bring that up on the screen in just a moment, but there's a nice diagram with color coding as to which units would be proposed as studio apartments and which would be proposed as 2-bedroom apartments. There are also 5 units that are being proposed as commercial live-work units. So an individual might rent it and run a business out of that space. What I guess we can say from a high up perspective and working our way down is that the site reflects previous development style and standards that was more typical of pre-land use action or development in Creswell, at least within our jurisdiction's history of land use. And as such, the applicant had several challenges to address related to the site and how it functions, knowing that many of the parcels in this area of the community have had challenges accessing Oregon Avenue. After careful review of a number of requirements, you'll find, and as I get into the findings of fact, you'll find that there are several options as to how the applicant may proceed in considering meeting some of our current development code standards. But one of the primary reasons why they are being considered under site review tonight is that they have proposed, of course, a change of use, a permanent residential area above a ground floor commercial use that under our Creswell Development Code in section 4.2 is identified as requiring of a site review. Now, if this is not to be confused with some of the applications you've seen prior, which a commercial building, had it been through a previous iteration of site review in the city, i.e. it had been built more recently, you would be considering this more closely as a modification request. So if you want some more clarification on that, I can certainly provide it, but just suffice to say that because of its age, we had to start from the beginning and look through each of the development code sections to be sure that it complies. I've included in the staff report on page 2 a careful bullet point list of a variety of code sections that were focused on within the findings of fact. Sometimes that document can be a bit cumbersome or overwhelming in terms of how many details it includes, but here is a succinct list that highlights the areas in which the applicant is going to make changes or modifications to the site in order for it to comply with our current code requirements. That said, I think the applicant can certainly make their argument about our need for housing, our need for workforce housing and smaller size and smaller, maybe more affordable units as a result of their size and scale. It's something that we identified within our housing needs analysis that we provide, and our development community constructs many single-family detached homes every year on the order of about 15 to 20. Is the typical number. In this case, we could have a potential of having quite a few more housing units come onto the market, which is something that's quite exciting from my perspective in considering that 859 unit deficit that our housing needs analysis identified, particularly around multifamily housing. Getting into some of the more detailed items, you'll recall in your work related to the transportation system plan that this site has an identified right-of-way that is identified to access areas south of the site, primarily zoned industrial. It's identified in the transportation system plan as Project R4, which is a high priority new roadway extension leaving East Oregon Avenue and traveling south to the north property line of the former mill site. You'll know it as Bald Knob. That roadway is not just intended to access the industrial site, but rather it is conceived of as a swing through or a bypass for our troubled intersection at Oregon Avenue and Highway 99. In future, that roadway aspires to leave the southbound off-ramp, on-ramp area at East Oregon Avenue and travel south all the way through and across the railroad tracks to meet either D Street or F Street, depending on the design and development of the industrial area. And that's something that we've talked about in detail, and the applicant and staff have spent a fair deal of time discussing. And I'll get to kind of where that fits into the puzzle as we get through the findings of fact. And finally, and you'll see actually that concept drawing in your staff report as well, just to highlight on page 3. The concept plan that the applicant has provided basically assumes that most of the area will remain very similar to its present state. A large amount of the changes or improvements will occur inside the building, which is less the purview of the Planning Commission and more the purview of the building code. However, there are some key areas where our development code speaks to some challenges, namely related to pedestrian access to the site and the build to line, which is a criterion provided that intends to develop commercial areas in a more pedestrian friendly manner. So you'll notice that in section 2.3 of our development code, the build to line is highlighted at a maximum of 60 feet from a public right-of-way, unless a pedestrian walkway or other ADA compliant facility is provided to connect. In this case, the applicant has provided a concept of how that might happen. And I think what you'll find is that in conditioning your approval tonight related to that item, it will give us, staff, and the applicant opportunity to flesh out what that might look like and how to proceed on that item. We just have some concerns about how a sidewalk might be installed there and how that might affect some of the other users that are guaranteed access through their private right-of-way access easement. For more information about the easements, I'm happy to provide a very robust title report that details many of the interrelationships between properties on the site. I guess just from an anecdotal background perspective, my understanding is that the site and other sites in this vicinity at some point were part of a car dealership or car lot, and that car lot ceased to exist before our land use code was really put into action, and as a result, the lots got carved up as they are today, but with lots of private access and reciprocity easements throughout. Suffice to say, it's a very challenging area to sort out if you're not familiar with the legacy of some of those easements. From our public works perspective, and I apologize, the comments are forthcoming from our city engineer and our public works director, but their perspective on this is that it's a reuse of an existing building, and with the exceptions of provision of that pedestrian walkway, adequate utilities as to be approved through construction design review, and any required fire access easements, say for a fire turnaround or a dedicated fire lane. Those are items that can be determined at construction design review and are not included in your packet tonight, but certainly will be provided. Before I move on to the findings of fact, does anyone have any questions? Okay, I'm going to take your silence as a wholehearted yes. We're good to roll. All right. Moving on to the findings of fact, I'll get right to the chase, which is down in section, I believe it's section F, which describes the conditions of approval, and if my computer would load them, I would really appreciate that. Give me just 1 second and I will reopen that. Oh, I know why. I'm going to have to turn off my camera for just a second. Hang on, team. All right, thanks for your patience. Back in the game. One area that I want to highlight before hopping into the fun part of the conditions of approval, I would like to just highlight one section that was important that I frankly omitted from your version of the findings of fact. And I'm happy to actually put them up on the screen right now because I think that would be the easiest way to share them with you. There are areas that the chair highlighted that were reviewed as criteria for the application. And there was one section that I did not include that had to do with multifamily housing area that primarily focuses on three things. One is private open space, the second is public open space or common area, and the third is a trash receptacle, which are all three the primary areas of review regarding multifamily housing developments. So let me just scroll to that section, and that way both the applicant and our team can have a better sense of what that looks like and where it fits in. But essentially the application covers those areas, and I just wanted to make clear in the findings that those are part of our review. Now if I could just find it in the sea of items. Here we are. Okay. And if I'm delicate enough, I can get this to share part of my screen. Sorry for the delay, team. That's the report. Here are the findings. Okay. Can anyone see? Can you all see those findings of fact on your screen? That's a heads nodding yes. Okay, good news. The areas that were omitted from the version that you were sent in the mail. Start at. Oh, very happy. Start at multifamily housing, and those include common open space. 10% of the site is required to be provided as common open space, which the applicant shows on their proposed plan. That shows approximately 16% of the site as being provided landscape with about 1,900 square feet of recreation space. You'll see a little example of a play structure and describing applicant material. There's a requirement for private open space for ground floor and upper floor units based on the criteria mentioned here. And the development as it's presented here provides private outdoor areas, particularly along common walkways, that a person could rent a space and then have a small area where they might put some seating or store plants or other private amenities. And then finally, that trash receptacles particularly be oriented away from building entrances. And that the receptacle, as you'll see in the applicant's proposal, has been located at the very southern end of the site, southwestern end of the site. And I think the only thing that is a requirement of that trash receptacle is that there be an adequate hedge or screening or a fence of some kind that's at least 6 feet that can block the visibility of that for both the residents and folks who might be visiting. So my apologies for not having included that in your version. I sent that out. It's funny when you hit send and then you have this feeling that something's missing. Happens to me all the time, and I appreciate your grace on that one. It was a really straightforward one. It wasn't just so obvious that I didn't make it into the initial cut. Okay, let's start with these conditions of approval. And these, again, commissioners, are areas where the applicant's prerogative is to provide the city with as little detail or as much detail as they'd like at the point of issue, in this case, a site design review. Often you'll see in the findings that we specify points at which the applicant ought to provide construction plans and elements that are required prior to building permit. And then finally, areas of specificity that are required prior to the certificate of occupancy. Is everyone able to view the site design review criteria on the screen now? Yeah, okay, good. So looking specifically at these, the big item that we are continuing to work through with the applicant is an opportunity to provide a walkway that connects the building's primary entrance and commercial spaces to East Avenue. Assuming that this development will have a number of 47 units, some of which are 2-bedroom units. There are probably several different folks that will want to use, or we want to encourage them to use, pedestrian and cycling and all kinds of other alternate modes of transportation, particularly to access resources in downtown Creswell. So we looked at options for where that pedestrian pathway could be connected. The challenge is that the pedestrian connection doesn't have to make it. It also has some challenge related to how to take an open frontage, which right now the east side of AM/PM provides an open access. There's no defined driveway entrance to that gas station, and would need to isolate areas in particular that would provide access by way of a crosswalk or another marking of the ground that would indicate areas where that facility, the gas station, could be accessed. So we see like a number of application or implementation items that we need to work through, and those we hope will work through in the construction design phase. That said, there are some requirements that are very specific about walkways, and walkways that are longer than 24 feet are required to be of a contrasting surface, recognizing that those longer crossings are in fact more dangerous for pedestrians, and it's a good indicator for drivers. When the pavement materials change, it's a good indicator that it's a long-lasting indicator that there are going to be pedestrians here, and you need to watch out for them. Some other things that we'd need to see addressed. There are some issues with the existing parking lots. Just in summary, the parking lots are a very traditional kind of, I would call them fairly older design style that do not meet some of our requirements related to separation of spaces. So particularly the landscaping elements will help the applicant meet these criteria. You saw that in great application at the Creswell Marketplace development and their redesign of their parking lot to include landscaping. So staff will work with the applicant to identify where those locations are. I believe it's a total of 3 spaces that that might be impacted by that landscaping improvement. When it comes to the commercial spaces in particular that the applicant proposes to use as commercial, those are particularly north-facing elevation, and there is an west-facing elevation and east-facing elevation that all will need some kind of commercial-style retrofit. And I think given the applicant's history of working with older buildings and reimagining them, I see that as something that's well within their wheelhouse to provide. That's sort of the premise for separating the commercial spaces by trim and other features, and kind of keeping the detail of the roof line and other elements that are typical of commercial style developments below residences. ADA ramps. This development was built well before ADA. However, there were retrofits done to provide access to the Super 8, and you'll see in the plan that there are several ADA facilities and rooms provided. Again, a call out to the crosswalks in areas that exceed 24 feet. Anywhere there's a walkway, the minimum width for those walkways is 6 feet wide. And again, just some detail about ADA parking and bicycle parking. You'll note that the applicant has provided bicycle parking in a covered location or is identified as a long-term space at the southwest corner of the property. That area, in order to be considered long-term spaces, would need a porch cover or something that will shield the bikes from weather. But they do provide spaces up at the north end of the site to comply with commercial bicycle parking requirements. The applicant will need to focus on a landscape plan that basically meets a number of our requirements related to landscaping. They tend to be very specific. We have some requirements about screening and hedges that can be provided not only around the waste facility, as I mentioned before, the trash enclosure, but also at the perimeter of the parking areas. That's the intent of that is to provide a screen or a buffer for headlights pulling into those parking spaces and not shining lights into residential units in the evening. Oregon Fire Code, as I mentioned, will make sure to bring Danny Soulsby from South Lane Fire District over to assure that all marking of fire lanes and no stopping, no parking areas are striped or curbed. I would just add as a side note, Danny has been working on unifying our fire lane markings between our community and Cottage Grove. So he put together a nice pamphlet. Happy to provide to the applicant that can help in that, but I'm sure he'll refer to that when he specifies some of the requirements that he wants. If there are any changes to the water utilities, water or sewer, there may be some need to change the size of the metering, but that's all something that the applicant has assured they're able to move forward with the facility as is. Prior to the building permit approval, we would like to see the walkway detail shown in construction plans, so some constructible design level work. And if there are any easements that are required to provide services to the property, we'll work with our city engineer to address those. And then finally, before certificate of occupancy, you'll see a series of requirements. One of which is that sidewalk along the flag stem, or the applicant might opt to defer construction. In deferring construction, they would be required to either provide a financial guarantee or to improve that facility at a time in the future. Often those agreements include a non-remonstrance agreement should the city move forward with a local improvement district in this location. As far as the remaining criteria, you'll see that there are landscaping requirements. I'll come out and check those before we issue the C of O, and those will be kind of the last checklist for the application. And if there are any lights that are installed, and I would kind of highlight this, and it's something that the city has identified that isn't, it's part of the lighting and requirement for redevelopment of properties, but we don't have we have a measurement that's that focuses on something called foot candles. I just emphasize our concern or our interest in the lighting scenario is primarily related to safety. We know that this area is right near the interstate, and it has a lot of night traffic, and we'd like very much for the folks who live here to feel safe and comfortable. So we would very much for a lighting plan to make sure that there is adequate lighting throughout the parking area, the bicycle parking area, and at least connections to that pedestrian walkway. So I'll stop there, and I just say thank you for listening to a summary of the staff report and findings of fact, and I'd be happy to answer any questions you have at this time. Otherwise, I think you could turn it over to the applicant's representatives and see how they add to what I've shared.
All right, go to the testimony section. So do any of the applicants have anything to add to what Maddie said? Anything you guys would like us to know about your project? I'm going to assume that's a no. All right. Apparently you did a very good job, Maddie.
Oh, I don't know. Silence doesn't always mean success. But just suffice to say that I guess I'd express some appreciation for the applicant's team. I know you did put together, you'll notice on this application cover, there's a V3. That means we went through several iterations of design work, and I'm appreciative that they were take some of my comments to heart, but also have shown a lot of interest in collaborating with staff.
All right. Awesome. Yeah, you that I would definitely like to say that I appreciate what you guys put out, because it's definitely very, very helpful in us kind of being able to see what you guys have in mind, and it definitely looks fantastic. So I'm pretty excited for it. All right.
I echo what Jessica just said.
Sorry, go ahead.
Oh,
I
you,
agree
Michael.
with Jessica.
Sorry, Susan. Yeah.
Just wanted me to let you guys know we're excited and we've enjoyed collaborating on this project. So.
Great. Thank
I
you.
think Maddie did a great job explaining it all, just the overview. Yeah, like it was really thorough. It was all a team effort to put together that, like, big application packet. And Maddie, I think you kind of like laid out our case pretty well. Thank you.
For everyone's
Hi,
vacation, Haley, we
oh,
didn't get to introduce everyone, but Haley Lash is the project manager. Carrie, who's about to talk, is one of the owners, and Joe, is that Joe up there in the corner who spoke just a moment ago, is one of the other project managers.
thanks,
Go ahead,
Maddie.
Carrie.
I think I apologize if we weren't right there. I'm I'm on vacation, so I'm trying to multitask here, but I did want to reiterate how much our ownership group and our team has appreciated the way that the city has given their time and energy and attention to this project, and it's really been a pleasure. And I don't know how many times you can say that about working with a bureaucracy of sorts. And so that is much appreciated by our team. And I'm not sure if Jim is still on. I didn't know if he was going to make a statement or not, but I agree that you did a great job of giving a synopsis of what we're hoping to accomplish for the city. So thank you.
Awesome. Thank you, Carrie.
Would it be improper to get an idea of what the price point on the apartments and the bedroom is going to be? Because we're looking for like medium income type housing.
I think without giving specifics, we can say, Daniel is commenting. He says yes. I don't know if he has lost his audio. Based on our rent studies, that it is going to be, market rate below or at that achievable below market rate rents.
Our goal in our market studies are to keep a 2-bedroom and a studio below the market rates. We kind of found, a 2-bedroom in the $1,200 range. I think we're going to be well below that. A studio, believe it or not, it's crazy to me to think this, but studios are in the $900 range. We've got some in the $1,100 range. In Eugene, we're going to be well below that as well for a studio. So I don't want to say anything to make promises to anybody, but if I had to guess, we'll be in the $700 range on a studio and under $1,000 for a 2-bedroom apartment.
That sounds very reasonable. Thank you.
All right. Thank you for your comments. Do any commissioners have any other questions? No? Okay.
Jessica, just to highlight, Tammy did ask a question in the chat box. I don't know if she's having trouble with her audio, but she asked if the pool is going away. The kids' play area will have outdoor lighting ? And Dan, thank you for responding to that in the chat, saying yes. Much to many pool hoppers' chagrin, the pool may not exist anymore after the play area is installed.
That's correct. We have a lighting plan for that whole area that will be part of the play area. And as much as we've vacillated about the pool, I think that the ongoing maintenance coupled with the thought of a child ever having an accident there, it's not something we want to live with. So we've decided a playground will be more suitable and we'll make it a nice one.
All right. That sounds awesome. Thank you. Does any other commissioners have anything else? All right. Maddie, do we have anyone online that's made any comments or have any questions?
Thank you, Chair. At the risk of giving myself kudos, the only thing that was presented in the live chat was a thank you for dedicated public servants representing Creswell here. Thank you for your service. I'm going to assume that's to you, commissioners, and not to me.
All right.
But I asked her to, her name's Lori May, or at least that's how she's logged into YouTube. And she, I asked her if she was interested in commenting on the current application, and I haven't seen any returned comment yet.
Daniel, do you have something else to say?
I said we were wanting to thank you, Maddie.
Thank you, Dan. I appreciate that very much, and I'll look forward to continuing to move through those conditions of approval as you start to address them. In fact, I think I've already received a call from one of your consultants about landscaping plans, so that's a wonderful addition.
All right. Does anyone else have any other comments, questions? Maddie, commissioners, anyone? Audience members? No? All right. We're going to go ahead and move.
Chair, I'd just add one thing. I just want to be sure, thank you for the technological grace of all these different versions of things and screen sharing and all that. So nice work, team, on at least allowing me to provide you with as much material as I can at the date of the hearing, including those edits related to the multifamily housing criteria. And then secondly, I just present one sort of summary statement that has very little to do with the site review itself, but more related to the right-of-way that the city would very much like to see some kind of future agreement put together to address a potential in the future of acquiring that right-of-way. I know you all worked very hard on our efforts around the transportation system plan, and given that the city is not financially in the place that it would like to be in terms of being able to purchase that right of way, and as a result we can't move that forward immediately, we would very much like to work with the applicant's team to kind of move at least a step in the right direction or a step forward on that project as we see you meet some of those conditions of approval. So thanks for your patience on that. I know it can be a little bit unclear when a city asks for the moon and then we have to figure out what the moon looks like and how much it costs. and that's always an interesting negotiation. So thanks for bearing with us.
Alrighty, then I am going to go ahead and close the hearing and move on to deliberation. Commissioners, what do we think about this so far? What's your guys' thoughts?
This is Daniel, and I think it's a lovely idea.
Okay. I think, I'm not gonna lie, I think most of us tend to agree with you. The thoughts of having that be something, let alone mixed use, is fantastic. It's definitely something I wish we had a long time ago, something I feel like I could have gotten use out of quite some time ago. So I think it's going to be amazing moving forward. Susan, you have comments?
I agree. Let's get started.
I think it's the proverbial, is it done yet?
Okay, all right, those are good. Anyone else? Seth, do you have anything? Or Patrick, any of you guys have anything?
I think it's great. I'd much rather see something happening with that building, just a big vacant spot right off the interstate. My only concern really is is going back to the right of way thing. And I know that the city is not in a position to do anything with it right now, so it is what it is. I'm just thinking if this gets developed and there's a bunch of parking where a future right of way would like to be, what is the probability of that happening down the road? And I don't have an answer. I just
Daniel speaking for the applicant team. I think the probability from our perspective is high. I think, we've tried to, this is a new thing to us. So we tried to provide a letter of intent, letting the city know we're on board with it. I think Maddie could attest to it's premature based on the funding and things like that, but we're 100% behind doing this right of way anywhere down the line that the city decides. One of the things that we designed about this plan is that at any point in our building out the building and doing our property, we have the ability to switch over and do the right of way and with relative ease. So not a lot of components about our building or our site change, even when we do switch over to the right of way. So I think if hopefully that answers your question, but from our perspective, we're 100% on board with it, and it'll just probably be a matter of time.
thank you.
Yeah, and Commissioner Clark, that's something I guess I'd just follow up by saying that though the city isn't prepared necessarily to perform the right of way work, you might imagine if the city was so fortunate as to find a developer or a new owner for that mill site, and we were able to kind of convert on some of the economic development opportunities that the state offers. There might be some way to purchase the right of way and build it per the but sort of a but for scenario. The development of the mill might happen but for this road, and we'd be able to leverage some opportunity funds, among other things, to make that successful. I think the challenge right now is that we may have an opportunity. We're very fortunate in that the developer is so accepting of the concept, and should that right of way ever be established through this area that you can kind of see right now from East Oregon Avenue, we would go through a series of negotiations whereby we'd identify who moves what and where it gets relocated, particularly the parking that would be consumed by that right of way. And actually the applicant in their version 2 provided a great sort of shadow plat or a concept of how that could happen, particularly utilizing the gravel area that's just to the south of their existing parking spaces. To provide we would negotiate how to provide a new paved parking area and also provide parallel parking along that future street in areas that it's possible to do so. But that said, I think, the big picture view is that street not only would resolve some of our traffic issues, but also could really tie together what is currently a less than sort of ideal development as far as where parking and folks might be walking, and kind of finishing off or tying together areas. Often you as a planning commission speak about road improvements and street design as kind of setting the table. In fact, I think, Ed, that was the way that you presented it in some cases, and also David, when we talked about downtown commercial streets. In this case, we would be setting the table for a really successful residential commercial mixed development in this location by establishing right of way. I mean, I've got ideas about where to put street trees and all kinds of things. So when the time comes, we'll be ready.
All right. Are we ready to make a motion? Yes. Okay. Who wants to go? I will go. All right. I move that the Planning Commission approve with conditions case number SR-2020-02 Creswell Butte Apartments as presented
And amended.
And amended, yes. And authorize the chair to sign the findings of fact. Is there a second?
Second.
All right.
Was that a second from Commissioner Gary?
No, that was David.
David. Okay, great. Thank you.
That was the user speaking.
User, yes, Mr. User. All right, all those in favor of the motion, I'm going to call out one by one. David?
Yes.
Susan?
Yes.
Ed?
Yes.
Seth?
Yes.
Tammy?
Yes.
And Patrick?
Yes.
Okay, there's a unanimous approval of SR-2020-02. Congratulations.
Thank you, Chair.
You're welcome.
Is it done yet?
Right.
All right.
Believe it or not, we're a long ways already into the project, so we're hoping to get some building permits soon and get this thing done before you know it.
Awesome.
Great. Thank you so much.
Oh, perfect. That worked.
Thank you, everyone.
Okay. Now moving on to the staff development summary. Maddie, would you please present the staff development summary?
Absolutely, Chair. Thank you. This is your monthly installment of what all is happening in Creswell. I should have a good intro, like radio announcers do when they when they introduce a segment. Let's see, what's going on in Creswell? We are seeing a continued stream of interest in additions to existing single-family homes. So that has not subsided, and we are into our 10th land use application for what seems to be all additions in the recent weeks. There are some projects that are getting underway right now. Craig Estates' third edition, which is up at the old Taylor property, is under construction. So you'll probably see quite a bit of activity up there, just north of the last development, which was on an extension of Hillgas. So this is just north of there. That you'll remember includes a public road called Owens Way that will extend from Crestwood Drive through to North 5th Street. We are intending, the city does intend to install new speed signs to indicate 25 miles per hour up farther north than they have been installed recently because those properties have now annexed into the city. So that's a good sign of progress there. We have been working with an applicant who's inquired about annexing property on the east side, on the west side of Dale Cooney Road, across from Trevino Road. So just north of Cloverdale Road, right across the way from the entrance to the reserve. And we have run into challenges between DEQ and some of their limitations placed on the sewer system that may or may not impact how the city can develop into those areas. You might recall that we did a buildable lands inventory. Land that's in that inventory is identified for development potential. It's inside of our urban growth boundary and therefore very important that we're able to see it develop. The fact that there's a moratorium on extending sewer mainline extensions in that location is quite troubling to staff, and so we are working through that as best we can, but it's clear as mud right now. Aside from that, this was a very exciting public hearing to have. We were looking forward to the motel seeing a new life as affordable or workforce housing units. We continue to work with the applicant on Holbrook Lane, who is developing plans to install somewhere on the order of 20 to 22 housing apartment units at where used to be a red house. You were favorable to allow that to be rezoned high density residential, and we are working through a water transmission line question in the rear of that property. Aside from that, on sort of the domestic side, staff is adapting to how we do business without being open to the public at City Hall. And I'll have you know that if all things are successful and we are able to see this YouTube channel video up, provided that I did it all right at the beginning of this stream, that I am currently at my home in Eugene, and we are successfully hosting on a live channel, which this is like a monumental event for me, to see us all networked on this interface and also streaming on the web. That was a huge hurdle to overcome. So I'm very happy to report that if we ever have interruptions otherwise, the show will go on. Other than that, I guess the other hot topic is that the old theater building went up for sale, or is up for sale right now. And that building, you'll recall, was, or you may recall, was considered on the City of Creswell City Council's agenda in last month's work session as to whether or not the city was interested in purchasing it. The council did not move forward in considering purchase of the property, and so now I've had a slew of interested parties inquiring about it, about what it could be used for. If you have any great ideas, please feel free to share. But that building may be one of the oldest buildings remaining in Creswell. It was developed in 1905, and it was built by Woodsmen of the World, the WOW. And that building has persisted in its current location, in its original location, I think the longest, correct me if I'm wrong, of any building in Creswell, aside from perhaps some private residences. So that's kind of a neat opportunity, and it's a really cool location for someone who has a big idea. So I've been kind of working with folks that might be interested in that. Beyond that, I think the highlights from staff are that we are going to put out we submitted a Safe Routes to School grant last week, asking for improved crossings. Thank you for your support on that application, and details of that primarily consist of improvements to crossings, particularly across larger volume roadways, with a couple of rapid flashing beacons in 2 locations. We did get support from the Lane Area Commission on Transportation on that application, as well as from both the middle school and elementary school principals, who are both new. So that was kind of a neat way to meet them. And finally, sort of a forecast or what to look forward to in the future. The city will be flying an application or an opportunity to work for the city of Creswell as an assistant planner. So if you know any qualified applicants, please let them know that about the first week of October we'll probably be advertising. And coupled immediately after that will be an assessment or a request for proposals related to an urbanization study. And as I kind of alluded to in that buildable lands discussion about being able to serve properties on the east side of I-5, urbanization is the first step or a step in the process of determining whether or not the city can expand its urban growth boundary. So we will be embarking on the journey that we have, well, I guess we embarked several years ago, but we will be continuing on that journey, the odyssey, as it were, to determine how much and where the city might be able to grow in order to accommodate 20 years of housing and economic development needs. And I'm happy to answer any questions about that, but in the next few weeks or months, you'll hear quite a bit about urbanization and how that works. I'll put together a summary sheet for you, and also to the council, just kind of lining out what that means and how it works and what we're looking forward to and what we're hoping to avoid.
Maddie, is it okay to ask a question about the Star Theater?
Absolutely.
The people that have called you and expressed kind of an interest, have they shared what their idea is that they would use the building for? And are you allowed to repeat it? I mean, none of it is serious, so.
Absolutely, Commissioner. I think it's safe to say that no one has expressed anything that they've said is confidential. So I can share that the last two interested parties, the first indicated they'd like to turn the house into a live-work unit to provide opportunity for someone to live and have a storefront at the house. They weren't terribly specific about the theater space itself. Another applicant or interested party expressed interest in turning the whole thing into residential use. And yet another identified a ground floor commercial space with some augmentation of that housing unit in the rear, namely to probably make it into 2 units and then have open up the windows again and provide another retail space at the corner. But as you and then a fourth interested party mentioned or expressed interest in assuring that space be reserved for public meeting space. We know that there might be negotiation over the community center and whether or not that will impact the available space in the community for meetings or meeting rooms. And so it was expressed that maybe there might be a community desire to see that provide some kind of public-facing meeting space.
Do you happen to know, and this is maybe inappropriate for me to ask, but was the city offered that building at the price that it is currently on the market for, which is $260,000? Do you know? I mean, I'm just wondering.
I haven't a clue, even if I could share it, but I don't know. I apologize.
No, that's fine. I just was curious, being nosy.
But the family said something to the effect. I went in and peeked at it just when they were kind of getting ready for that big garage sale, and the family members expressed that they didn't think the building had a lot of value and encouraged us to consider making it into a parking lot.
Interesting. And okay, one other question. When you were talking about troubled sewer extension, did you say something about Dale Cooney, or were you saying behind DQ? That part was, my brain wasn't grasping where you were talking about for sure. I just heard east side.
Sure. I can give you kind of the 30-second recap, which is that the facility on the east side was owned by a previous owner and permitted. And every developed lot, commercial and residential, was identified with a lateral. So every lot that's identified on the east side of Creswell either is served with a lateral or was approved for service by DEQ.
Right.
Now, that's not to say that properties outside of the current city limits aren't ripe for development, i.e. there's a whole area between Dale Cooney Road and Sunday Drive that is undeveloped. And in order for it to be developed into traditional subdivision housing, let's say, They would be required to extend a public main line to serve multiple units. And DEQ, because of where that wastewater facility is in its re-permitting process, will not allow additional mainline extensions. So should an individual wish to develop more lots and establish more sewer trunk line, DEQ has put the brakes on that, which is problematic from a buildable land standpoint, and particularly as we go into urbanization. But that's to say that each of those lots, particularly those that are commercial in nature or are seeking one housing unit on a lot, could connect to the existing sewer facilities.
Hey, Maddie, have there been any contact with Sunday Drive with, was it Pliskas?
Oh, you mean the townhouse units that were modified to be separate units?
Yeah, I know that's been, I mean, that was a hotbed of controversy when we were trying to go through it.
Yeah.
I would have figured they would be already trying to do something about that.
My thoughts exactly, Commissioner Gehring. In fact, there's been remarkable silence on that, and I've sent a couple emails. The only contact, and if you have contact with Jim Pliska, I'd be happy to continue to send him information about particularly about what's happening related to sewer or floodplain material. And also sewer. But we have concern at the city that the flood maps are changing, and it may make it difficult for those lots to develop quite as easily. Timing is everything.
Yep.
Yes.
What's happening with Holly's daycare?
The daycare. Last I heard, there was the applicant was fairly quiet about his interest in proceeding on his application for a building permit. We have suspended his building permit at this point because there wasn't any progress or movement on it. We simply entered the information into our permitting system and waited. Our public works director had a sense that perhaps the public improvements on A Street might have changed his timeline. However, from a procedural standpoint, I have not received anything in writing that says that he wanted an extension to his site review, which means that it expires. And so it may be that the city brings that same approval back to you in its existing form and asks for you to reauthorize an extension if he decides to proceed. Typically, those are good for 1 year.
Thank you.
Oh. Can't hear you, Jessica. Unmute. Let me try to help. Nope. Usually, Jessica, you're on mute and I can't hear you.
She looks unmuted.
Oh, yeah?
Doesn't say she's.
Can you hear it?
No, I can't hear her, but she's
Time to
not
end the
muted.
meeting.
That's weird because I sure were muted.
Darn it. What on earth is happening? Jessica, I made you the manager of the meeting. because I was having trouble earlier in the meeting, and now I can't help you.
I move for Susan to adjourn us.
There you go. All right, Tammy, way to move.
Good job, everyone.
Susan, would you do the honors? Unless there are any more questions.
Are you all finished, Maddie?
I am. I just hope that everyone gets through this heat wave okay. And if there's anything I can do to help, please let me know.
Do you have air conditioning at your house?
Nope.
I guess you're not going to help me then.
Nope. I'm sweating it out.
See, I'm in a house that was built in 1904 and the temperature inside is 68 degrees. See, I'm sorry, guys.
Whew.
Okay. So are we ready to adjourn? Okay.
I second that.
Thank you.